The coin purse felt heavier than it should have, as Aria Thorne stepped into the marble hall of the mourning chamber, her black veil obscuring her face just enough to hide the guilt burning in her chest. She had done desperate things before: stolen bread, forged documents, lied to landlords, but this was different. This was a performance before an audience of immortals, and if they caught her, no mortal law would save her from their wrath. The advertisement had been simple enough, posted in the shadowed corners of the city where human and vampire worlds intersected. Widow needed for ceremonial mourning. Vampire nobility. One night, 5,000 coins. 5,000 coins could change everything. It could pay off her brother's medical debts, keep him in treatment for another year, maybe two. It could give him a chance. So here she stood, draped in borrowed grief, about to pretend she had loved and lost a vampire lord she had never met. The chamber was magnificent in its sorrow. Black silk draped from vaulted ceilings, and candles flickered in silver sconces along walls carved with ancient symbols. At the room's center sat an obsidian coffin, closed and gleaming, surrounded by blood-red roses that seemed too vibrant to be real. Vampires filled the space, pale, elegant creatures with white hair and skin like moonlight, their eyes ranging from silver to crimson to deep violet. They wore mourning clothes of midnight velvet and silk, and they watched her approach with the still intensity of predators. "The widow arrives," someone murmured, and the crowd parted. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her pace slow and measured, the way the woman who had hired her had instructed. "You are Seraphine," she had said, counting gold coins into Aria's trembling hands in a dim alley 3 nights ago. "You were his secret human bride, married in shadow, and now you mourn him publicly. Weep prettily. Say nothing specific. Collect your coin when the ceremony ends." It had seemed simple then. Now, surrounded by beings who could hear her racing pulse and smell her fear, it seemed insane. She reached the coffin and placed one gloved hand on its cold surface, bowing her head as if overcome. The weight of dozens of immortal gazes pressed against her skin. "Poor creature," a female vampire said softly. "To lose one's mate so young." "Drevarius was always fond of human fragility," another replied, and there was something sharp in the words, something that made Aria's stomach twist. Drevarius. That was his name. The vampire lord she was pretending to mourn. She knew nothing about him except that he had supposedly died 3 weeks ago in some sort of attack, and that his death had left a power vacuum in the vampire court of Ashencross City. The woman who hired her had been vague about the details, insistent only that Aria play her part convincingly. "Speak," commanded a voice like winter itself. Aria looked up slowly and met the gaze of an ancient vampire standing at the head of the coffin. His hair fell like fresh snow past his shoulders, and his eyes were the color of frozen silver. Power radiated from him in waves that made her knees weak. "My lord," she whispered, grateful that her voice trembled. It would seem like grief rather than terror. "Speak of your beloved," he said, each word precise and cold. "Tell us of Drevarius, so that we may remember him through your eyes." This was not part of the plan. Panic clawed up her throat, but Aria forced it down and did what she had always done when cornered. She lied. "He was kind," she began, her voice soft and broken, "kinder than the world deserved. He found me when I was lost, and he showed me that love could exist even between our kinds." She let her voice catch, pressing her hand harder against the coffin. "He made me believe in impossible things." Several vampires made soft sounds of sympathy. The Ancient One continued to study her with those merciless eyes. "And how did he court you?" another vampire asked. "Where did you meet?" "In a garden," Aria said, pulling details from romance novels she had read by candlelight. "At twilight, when the world was caught between day and night. He said I looked like starlight, and I thought he was mad." A sob that was half genuine escaped her throat. "I should have had more time with him." "Yes," the ancient vampire said slowly. "You should have." Something in his tone made ice run down her spine, but before she could analyze it, music began, a haunting melody played on instruments she could not see. The vampires began to sing in a language that predated any human tongue, and Aria let herself sway slightly, playing the part of a grieving widow overwhelmed by sorrow and ceremony. The ritual continued for what felt like hours. She was given a golden chalice filled with something that smelled of wine and copper, told to drink in his memory. She sipped carefully, tasting blood mixed with alcohol, and forced herself not to gag. She was led in a procession around the coffin 3 times while vampires chanted. She was asked to place a lock of her hair on the lid, and she did, cutting a small piece with a silver knife provided for the purpose. Through it all she felt watched, studied, evaluated. Finally, as the ceremony began to wind down and vampires started to drift toward an adjoining hall where refreshments waited, the woman who had hired her appeared at Aria's elbow. She was small for a vampire, with white hair cut short and eyes like polished obsidian. "You did well," she murmured, The final payment will be delivered tomorrow night. Go now, before questions deepen. Aria nodded, grateful for the dismissal, and turned toward the exit. She was 3 steps from the door when it slammed open with enough force to crack the marble wall beside it. The vampire who entered was death and beauty made flesh. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his frame powerful beneath a long black coat that swept the floor. His hair was pure white, falling in wild waves to his shoulders, and his skin had the luminous pallor of a full moon. But it was his eyes that stole her breath, crimson and gold, burning with an intensity that made every candle in the room seem dim. He was devastating in the way storms were devastating, in the way avalanches and wildfires were devastating, beautiful and utterly lethal. And he was very, very alive. The room went silent. Several vampires made sounds of shock. One dropped a glass that shattered like a gunshot in the quiet. "Drevarius," the ancient vampire breathed, and for the first time his cold composure cracked into something like fear. "Drevarius, the dead vampire lord. The one whose widow Aria was pretending to be." His burning gaze swept the room, cataloging every face, and then locked onto Aria with the precision of an arrow finding its mark. "Hello, beloved," he said, his voice like whiskey and smoke. "I see you started mourning without me." Aria's mind went blank with terror. This was it. This was where she died. He would know instantly that she was a fraud, and he would tear her apart in front of everyone. And her brother would die alone and in debt because she had been stupid enough to think she could con vampires. But survival instinct was a powerful thing. Instead of running or confessing, Aria did the only thing she could think of. She threw herself at him with a cry of joy. "You're alive." She collided with his chest hard enough to bruise, wrapping her arms around him as if he were the answer to every prayer she had never said. He was solid as stone and cold as winter, and she could feel the shock in his absolute stillness. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then his arms came up slowly and folded around her, one hand splaying across her back, the other curling into her hair. He held her with a gentleness that seemed at odds with the violence evident in every line of his body. "Yes," he said softly, and she felt the word rumble through his chest. "I am." The room erupted. Vampires surged forward with questions and exclamations. The ancient vampire demanded to know what had happened. Others called it a miracle, a resurrection, a trick. Through it all, Drevarius held her, his body a shield between her and the chaos. "Enough," he said finally, and silence crashed down like a guillotine blade. "I will explain everything, but first I must speak with my wife alone." "Wife." The word hung in the air like a sword. The ancient vampire's silver eyes narrowed. "Of course, we will await you in the hall, my king, my king." Aria's terror ratcheted up another impossible notch. She had been pretending to mourn a vampire king. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, and within minutes the chamber was empty except for Aria and the very alive, very dangerous immortal still holding her. As soon as the door closed, she tried to pull away, but his arms became steel. "Stay exactly as you are," Drevarius murmured, his lips near her ear. "They can still hear us, and right now your racing heart could be explained by joy at my return. If you run, they will know something is wrong, and they will tear you apart to find out what." Aria froze. "I can explain, can you?" His voice was mild, almost amused. "I am deeply curious to hear how you came to be mourning a husband you have never met." "I needed money," she whispered. "My brother is dying. Someone hired me to play the widow. I didn't know you were a king. I didn't know you were alive. I didn't know anything." Clearly. His hand stroked down her back in a gesture that might have seemed comforting if she could not feel the lethal strength in his fingers. "Who hired you?" "A vampire woman. White hair, short black eyes." She felt him sigh. "Ilara, of course. She hoped to claim regency in my absence, and a grieving human widow would have been perfect, tragic, temporary, and easily disposed of once her usefulness ended." The casual way he said "disposed of" made Aria's blood run cold. "I am sorry," she said desperately. "I will leave. I will disappear. I will never speak of this to anyone." "You will do none of those things." Drevarius pulled back slightly, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. They were extraordinary up close, molten gold threaded through deep crimson and utterly inhuman. "Do you understand what will happen if I reveal you are a fraud? The vampires who supported Ilara's claim will seize on it as proof that I am weakened, that I can be deceived. They will move against me. There will be war within my court, and hundreds will die." His thumb brushed her jaw in a mockery of tenderness. "And you will be the first casualty, torn apart by those who will see you as a symbol of my failure." "Then what do I do?" Aria asked, hating how small her voice sounded. His smile was a dangerous thing. "You continue to play my grieving widow, and when I announce that my death was staged to draw out traitors, you will play my devoted wife. You will stand at my side, and you will be convincing, because both our lives now depend on it." "I can't. I am not." She struggled for words. They will know I am lying. They will know only what we show them, Drevarius said, and what we will show them is a vampire king so besotted with his human bride that he staged his own death to protect her from his enemies. It is romantic, tragic, exactly the sort of dramatic nonsense that will satisfy the court. And after, Aria whispered, when the danger passes, we will address that when we reach it. He released her chin but kept one arm around her waist. For now you belong to me, Aria Thorne. Play your part well and you will survive this. Betray me and I will make you wish I had left you to Alara's mercies. He knew her name. Of course he did. He was a king, and she was an intruder in his life. He would have discovered everything about her the moment he returned. Do you understand? He asked. Aria nodded, because what else could she do? She was trapped in a web of her own making, bound to a vampire king who was both her only protection and her greatest threat. Good. Drevarius brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture almost tender. Now dry your tears, beloved. We have a court to convince and traitors to execute. He said it so casually, as if executing traitors was no different than planning a dinner menu. Aria supposed that for him it was not. Together they walked toward the hall where the vampire court waited, and with every step, Aria felt the noose of her own deception tighten around her throat. She had wanted to save her brother. Instead, she had bound herself to an immortal king who smiled like a blade and held her like she was precious. She did not know which frightened her more, that he might kill her, or that some small, reckless part of her was not entirely sure she wanted to escape. The hall blazed with cold light from crystal chandeliers that hung like frozen stars. Vampires filled the space, their pale faces turned toward Drevarius and Aria with expressions ranging from joy to suspicion to barely concealed fury. At the far end, seated on a throne of black stone and silver, the ancient vampire waited. Beside him a smaller throne sat empty. My king, the ancient one said, rising. We rejoiced at your return, but we hunger for explanation. Where have you been these 3 weeks? Drevarius led Aria forward, his hand firm on her waist. She could feel every vampire's gaze dissecting her, searching for weakness. I have been hunting, Drevarius said, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. My spies brought word of a plot against my throne, against my life. I chose to give my enemies what they desired. I let them believe I was dead. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. And your wife? A vampire called out. Why did we know nothing of her? Because I valued her life above ceremony, Drevarius replied. I married Aria in secret to protect her from those who would use her against me. When I learned of the plot, I sent her into hiding and staged my death. I knew the traitors would reveal themselves if they believed me gone. And have they? The ancient vampire asked, his silver eyes sharp. They have. Drevarius gestured and guards appeared from side doors, dragging 3 vampires forward. One of them was Alara, her black eyes blazing with defiance. These 3 conspired with Lucien Drakemore to assassinate me and claim my throne. They failed. The name Lucien Drakemore sent a shock through the crowd. Several vampires hissed. Others drew back as if from contagion. Drakemore has been exiled for a century, the ancient vampire said. He would not dare. He has dared, Lord Casimir, Drevarius interrupted, and he has paid. I found him in the catacombs beneath the old city. His ashes are scattered in running water. Casimir's expression shifted into something like satisfaction. Then justice is served, not yet. Drevarius looked at the 3 captured vampires. These traitors stand before you. What does our law demand? Death, Casimir said simply. Death by sunrise. Aria felt sick. She had known vampires were dangerous, had heard stories of their ruthlessness, but witnessing it was different. Alara met her eyes across the distance, and there was no plea in her gaze, only cold calculation and the promise of revenge. My king, Alara said, her voice clear and strong. I confess to nothing. This human is no wife of yours. I found her in the mortal quarter, desperate for coin. I hired her to play widow because I thought it would honor your memory. If she has told you differently, she lies. Brilliant. Alara was trying to drive a wedge between them to make Drevarius question Aria's story. The vampires began to murmur again, looking between Alara and Aria with renewed suspicion. Aria's mind raced. If Drevarius hesitated even slightly, if he showed doubt, the court would fracture. She had to act. You promised me this would not happen, Aria said, turning to Drevarius. She let her voice break, let tears spill down her cheeks. You said if we kept the marriage secret I would be safe. You said they could not hurt me if they did not know I existed. She looked back at Alara. And you came to me with kindness. You said you had been my husband's friend. You said honoring his memory would bring me peace. You used my grief like a weapon. It was a gamble. Everything about this was a gamble. But Aria had learned long ago that the best lies were built on foundations of truth, and the truth was that Alara had manipulated her. Drevarius's hand tightened on her waist, and when he spoke his voice was soft and deadly. You used my wife's pain for your political games, Alara. You thought her ignorant and disposable. He paused. You were wrong. She is human, Alara spat. She will be dust in an eye blink. You would go to war over a mayfly. I would burn the world for her, Drevarius said, and the absoluteness in his voice sent chills down Aria's spine. Do not mistake mortality for worthlessness. She is mine, and what is mine I keep. The vampires fell silent. It was one thing to challenge a king over politics or power. It was another entirely to challenge him over a claimed mate. Vampire bonds were sacred, irrational, and absolute. Casimir studied them both for a long moment, then inclined his head. The law is clear. Alara and her conspirators will face the sun at dawn. Your claim to your throne and your bride is undisputed, my king. He smiled slightly. Though perhaps next time, warn us before you stage your death. My heart is not as young as it once was. Scattered laughter broke the tension. Drevarius inclined his head in acknowledgement. Noted, old friend. The guards dragged Alara and the others away. Alara did not struggle, but her eyes promised murder as she passed Aria. Then she was gone, and the hall began to fill with the sounds of conversation and relief. The crisis had passed. Drevarius turned to Aria, and for a moment his expression was unreadable. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so gentle and unexpected that she froze. Well done, he murmured against her skin. You are a better actress than I gave you credit for. I had good motivation, she whispered back. Survival is an excellent teacher. His laugh was quiet and genuine. Indeed it is. The rest of the night passed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Vampires approached to offer congratulations and study Aria with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain. She smiled until her face ached and held on to Drevarius like a lifeline because in truth he was. Without him she was nothing but prey in a room full of predators. Finally, as the sky began to pale toward dawn, Drevarius led her out of the hall and through a series of corridors that descended deep into the earth. They passed guards who bowed and servants who averted their eyes, moving through a palace carved from stone and ambition. Where are we going? Aria asked. My chambers, Drevarius said, where you will stay until this situation is resolved. And my brother is being moved to the royal hospital as we speak, Drevarius interrupted. He will receive the best care available, both mortal and immortal. Consider it payment for your performance tonight. Aria stopped walking. You would do that? Drevarius looked back at her, those burning eyes unreadable. You risked everything to save him. I respect that. And if you are to play my wife convincingly, you cannot be distracted by worry. He paused. Besides, I keep what is mine, and you are mine now, which makes your family mine as well. It should have sounded possessive and frightening. It did sound possessive and frightening. But it also sounded like protection, like security, like a promise she had never dared hope for. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded and continued walking. They descended another flight of stairs and emerged into a chamber that stole her breath. The room was enormous, carved from black stone and decorated with dark woods and deep crimson silks. A massive bed dominated one wall, surrounded by heavy curtains. Books lined shelves from floor to ceiling. A fireplace crackled with flames that gave off heat but no light. Windows were cut into the stone, but they showed only more stone. The chamber was far below ground, safe from the sun. You will sleep there, Drevarius said, gesturing to the bed. I do not require sleep as you do, so I will not disturb you. Aria looked at the bed, then at him. We are truly going to share a chamber. We are truly husband and wife. The court is concerned, Drevarius said. Separate chambers would raise questions. Do not worry, I have no interest in forcing myself on an unwilling partner. You are safe from me in that regard. She should have been relieved. She was relieved. But there was also something almost insulting about how easily he dismissed the idea, as if she were so far beneath his notice that the thought had never crossed his mind. What happens tomorrow? She asked instead. Tomorrow you rest. Tomorrow night you will dine with me and meet the inner court. We will continue to build the illusion of our marriage. He moved to a sideboard and poured himself a glass of something dark and red. Blood, she realized with a lurch of her stomach. And you will begin learning what it means to be a vampire queen. I am not a queen, Aria protested. I am a fraud playing dress-up in a world I do not understand. Drevarius took a sip from his glass, his eyes never leaving hers. You are what I say you are, and I say you are my wife and my queen. The rest is simply adaptation. He said it as if it were easy, as if she could simply step into the role of immortal royalty and pretend she belonged. I do not know how to be what you need me to be, Aria said quietly. Then learn. Drevarius set down his glass and crossed to her, cupping her face in his cold hands. You have already proven you are intelligent, brave, and quick-thinking. Those are the qualities of a queen. The rest is just polish. And when we no longer need to pretend? Aria asked. What happens to me then? His thumbs brushed her cheekbones, a gesture that seemed unconscious. I have not decided. Perhaps I will send you away with enough gold to live comfortably for the rest of your mortal life. Perhaps I will keep you here as a curiosity. His voice dropped. Perhaps I will offer you immortality if you prove yourself worthy. Aria's heart stuttered. Immortality? My blood can turn you, Drevarius said. Make you what I am, powerful, eternal. But such a gift is not given lightly, and it cannot be undone. He released her face and stepped back. We have time to discuss such things. For now, sleep. You are safe here. Safe. She was in a palace full of vampires pretending to be married to their king, and 3 people were going to burn to death at sunrise because of her lies. Safe seemed like a relative term. But she was also exhausted, wrung out from fear and adrenaline, and the bed looked impossibly inviting. Aria moved toward it, still wearing the black mourning dress, and sank onto the mattress. It was softer than clouds, more comfortable than anything she had ever touched. Aria, Drevarius said, and she looked up. You did well tonight. Truly, I am in your debt. It was the closest she had heard him come to genuine warmth, and it did strange things to her chest. You saved my life, she said. I think we are even. His smile was sharp and beautiful. Not even close, but we will have time to balance the scales. He turned away, settling into a chair beside the fire with a book, and Aria let her eyes drift closed. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Drevarius outlined in firelight, looking like a king from a dark fairy tale, beautiful and terrible and impossibly, dangerously real. When she woke, the room was lit by soft lamplight, and Drevarius was gone. In his place was a young woman with white hair and violet eyes, setting out a tray of food on a small table. Good evening, my lady, the woman said, bowing slightly. I am Celine. His Majesty has appointed me as your attendant. Aria sat up slowly, disoriented. What time is it? 2 hours past sunset, Celine replied. You slept through the day. His Majesty thought you needed rest after last night's ordeal. Last night, the mourning ceremony, Drevarius's return, the sentencing of the traitors. It all felt like a fever dream, but the opulent chamber around her proved it was real. Where is he? Aria asked. Attending to matters of state, Celine said. He will join you for dinner in 3 hours. I am to help you bathe and dress. Aria wanted to protest that she could bathe and dress herself, but the look in Celine's eyes suggested that refusing would be insulting. Besides, she had never had an attendant before, had never experienced luxury of any kind. Part of her was curious what it felt like. The bathing chamber was a marvel of heated water and scented oils. Celine helped her wash away the previous night's fear and tears, then dressed her in a gown of deep green silk that fit perfectly despite having never been measured for it. Vampire magic, perhaps, or simply excellent guesswork. You are very beautiful, my lady, Celine said as she arranged Aria's dark hair into an elegant style. His Majesty chose well. Aria met the vampire's eyes in the mirror. Did you know he was married? Celine hesitated, then shook her head. None of us knew, but it makes sense that he would keep such a thing secret. The king has many enemies. Did you know Ilara? Yes. Celine's expression hardened. She was ambitious and cruel. I am not sorry she met the sun. Aria shivered. Somewhere above them 3 vampires had burned to death this morning. She tried to feel guilt, but all she could muster was a strange numbness. They had used her, would have killed her, and would not have thought twice about it. Will there be others? Aria asked. Other attempts on his life? Always, Celine said simply. He is a king. Power invites challenge. She placed a final pin in Aria's hair. But he is also the strongest vampire in Ashencross. No one has successfully challenged him in 300 years. 300 years, Drevarius was at least that old and possibly much older. It made Aria's human lifespan seem even more fragile and brief. When she was ready, Celine led her through the palace to a private dining room. It was smaller than the grand hall, intimate and warm, with a table set for 2. Drevarius stood by a window that looked out onto an underground garden illuminated by soft magical light. He had changed into dark trousers and a white shirt that made his pale skin seem to glow. He looked every inch a king and every inch inhuman. You look lovely, he said as she entered. Celine chose the dress, Aria replied, suddenly nervous. I chose the dress, Drevarius corrected. Celine simply executed my selection. Green suits you. He pulled out a chair for her and she sat, feeling like a child playing at being an adult. The table was laden with food, human food, she noted with relief. Roasted meats, fresh bread, fruits and cheeses. A goblet of wine sat beside her plate. Drevarius took the seat across from her and poured himself a glass of dark red liquid from a crystal decanter. Blood. Aria tried not to stare. You must have questions, he said. Aria had 1,000 questions. She chose the most pressing. My brother, is he truly being cared for? I visited him this afternoon, Drevarius said. He is in the royal hospital, receiving treatments that would bankrupt a mortal family. The physicians believe they can cure him completely within 6 months. Relief hit her so hard she felt dizzy. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet, Drevarius said. This reprieve is conditional on your continued cooperation. Play your part well and he will live. Betray me and I will withdraw my protection. It should have made her angry, being threatened. But Aria understood power dynamics. She had been powerless her entire life, scrabbling for scraps. Drevarius held all the cards and he was being remarkably generous considering she had infiltrated his court under false pretenses. I understand, she said. Good. He gestured to her plate. Eat. You will need your strength. Aria ate, and as she did, Drevarius explained what would be expected of her. She would attend court functions at his side. She would learn vampire etiquette and politics. She would be seen and admired and envied, because a vampire king's human bride was both a rarity and a scandal. Why is it a scandal? Aria asked. Because vampires are immortal and humans are not, Drevarius said. Because taking a human mate is seen as either a tragic romance or a foolish indulgence. Because it implies I value you more than I value alliances with other vampire houses. He paused. And because it means I will watch you age and die, and I will be left alone. The bleakness in his voice startled her. Have you ever before me, I mean? Have you ever loved someone? Once, Drevarius said. A very long time ago. She was human. She died of fever before I could turn her. His eyes went distant. I swore I would never make that mistake again. Then why claim me as your wife? Aria asked. If it brings such pain. Because the fiction of you is useful, Drevarius said. And because I am beginning to suspect that you are far more interesting than a fiction. Their eyes met across the table and something electric passed between them. Aria felt it in her bones, a pull she did not understand and could not name. Drevarius felt it too. She could see it in the way his gaze sharpened, in the sudden tension in his shoulders. Tell me about yourself, he said abruptly. You know much of me by necessity. I know only that you are brave and desperate enough to con a vampire court. Give me more. So Aria talked. She told him about growing up in the mortal quarter with a brother 3 years younger, after their parents died in a factory fire. She told him about learning to steal and lie and survive, about the crushing weight of poverty, and the constant fear that she would lose the only family she had left. She told him about her brother Bryce, who was brilliant and kind, and who deserved a life better than the one they had been given. Drevarius listened without interrupting, his attention absolute. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You have spent your entire life protecting him, he said finally. Who protects you? No one. The answer was no one. Aria had been her own protection, her own strength for as long as she could remember. I do not need protection, she said. Everyone needs protection, Drevarius countered. Even queens, especially queens. He stood and crossed to her, extending his hand. Come. I want to show you something. Aria took his hand and let him lead her from the dining room through more corridors and up a spiral staircase that climbed higher and higher. Her legs were burning by the time they reached the top, but Drevarius showed no sign of exertion. He pushed open a door and cool night air rushed in. They emerged onto a tower balcony that overlooked the entire city. Ashencross sprawled below them, a glittering expanse of lights and movement. The mortal quarter huddled in the east, its buildings small and cramped. The vampire districts rose in the west, all elegant spires and dark beauty. And between them the night markets blazed with color and noise, the place where both worlds met and mingled. This is my kingdom, Drevarius said, standing beside her at the railing. Every light is a life I am responsible for. Every mortal, every vampire, every creature in between. They are all mine to protect and rule. It is beautiful, Aria said. It is a burden, Drevarius replied. But it is mine and I will hold it until the world ends. He looked at her. You are part of that now. Part of my kingdom. Part of my burden. I did not ask for that, Aria said. No, you asked for coin to save your brother. But fate has other plans. His hand covered hers on the railing. I will make you a promise, Aria Thorne. As long as you are mine, whether by fiction or truth, I will protect you. I will keep you safe from my enemies and my court, and I will never let anyone harm you the way Alara tried to. It was an oath, spoken with the weight of centuries behind it. Aria felt the truth of it settle into her chest like a warm coal. And what do you want from me in return? She asked. Drevarius's smile was slow and dangerous. I want you to be exactly what you are, clever, brave, honest when you can afford to be. I want you to stand beside me and not flinch when the world bares its teeth. He leaned closer. And I want you to trust me, even when every instinct tells you not to. That is a lot to ask of someone you have known for less than a day, Aria said. I am a king, Drevarius replied. I am accustomed to asking for the impossible. They stood there in the darkness, the wind whipping around them, and Aria realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could continue to see this as a temporary arrangement, a performance that would end when the danger passed. Or she could accept that her life had fundamentally changed, that she was now part of a world she had never imagined, tied to a vampire king who looked at her like she was both a puzzle and a prize. "I will try," she said finally. "I will try to trust you, but you have to be honest with me." "No more secrets than necessary." "Agreed," Drevarius said. "No more secrets than necessary." It was not a perfect promise, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, Aria learned what it meant to live in the vampire court. She attended dinners and balls, always at Drevarius's side, always dressed in the finest gowns and jewels. She learned the names and faces of the noble houses, the shifting allegiances and ancient grudges. She learned to smile when vampires said cutting things about her mortality, and she learned to deflect questions about her marriage with practiced grace. But she also learned about Drevarius. She learned that he was a fair ruler, quick to punish treachery but also quick to reward loyalty. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor and a love of old books. She learned that he played chess like a master, and that he enjoyed debating philosophy and politics. She learned that he was lonely, despite being surrounded by courtiers and servants, because immortality had cost him everyone he had ever truly cared about, and she learned that she was falling for him. It was not a sudden thing. It was gradual, like ice melting, like dawn breaking. It was in the way he always ensured there was human food at every meal, even when he did not eat it himself. It was in the way he listened when she spoke, truly listened as if her opinions mattered. It was in the way he positioned himself between her and danger without even thinking about it. His body a shield she had never asked for but desperately needed. One night, 6 weeks after his return, they were alone in his chambers. Drevarius was reading while Aria sat by the fire, attempting to embroider a piece of silk that Celine had insisted was appropriate for a queen. She was terrible at it, and after the third time she pricked her finger, she made a sound of frustration and threw the whole thing aside. Drevarius looked up from his book. "Struggling? I am not made for this," Aria said, gesturing at the abandoned embroidery. "I do not know how to be delicate and refined. I know how to survive, not how to be decorative." "Good," Drevarius said, setting down his book. "I have no use for decorative. I need someone with a spine." "Your court would disagree," Aria said. "I heard Lady Isadora yesterday, talking about how inappropriate it is for you to have a mortal queen. She said I diminish you." "Isadora is a pompous fool who has not had an original thought in 4 centuries, Drevarius said. "And if she had said that within my hearing, I would have reminded her that who I choose to take as my own is not subject to her approval." The fierceness in his voice made Aria's heart skip. "Why do you defend me so thoroughly? We both know this is a performance." Drevarius stood and crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. "Is it?" he asked quietly. "Is it still a performance, Aria?" She could not breathe, could not think. His eyes were burning into hers, and she could see the question there, the possibility. "I do not know," she whispered. "I do not know what this is anymore." "I do," Drevarius said. He took her hand, the one with the small puncture wound from the embroidery needle, and lifted it to his lips. She expected him to kiss it. Instead, he touched his tongue to the tiny bead of blood, and his eyes closed as if in pleasure. "You taste like sunlight," he murmured. "Like everything I cannot have." "You could have me," Aria said, and then flushed because it sounded like an offer, and maybe it was. Drevarius's eyes opened, blazing. "If I take you, it will not be while you are bound to me by necessity. It will not be because you feel you owe me, or because you are afraid of what will happen if you refuse." His thumb stroked the inside of her wrist, right over her pulse. "When I have you, it will be because you want me as much as I want you. And you will be certain." "I am certain," Aria said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I am terrified and confused and completely out of my depth, but I am certain that I want you." The sound Drevarius made was somewhere between a growl and a groan. "You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying," Aria replied. "I am saying that somewhere between pretending to love you and actually knowing you, the pretending became real. I am saying that I trust you and I want you, and I am tired of denying it." Drevarius surged up and kissed her. It was not gentle, it was desperate and claiming and absolutely consuming. His mouth was cool against hers, and he tasted like dark wine and danger. Aria kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his hair, her body arching toward his. He lifted her from the chair as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to the bed. They fell onto it together, a tangle of limbs in need. His hands mapped her body through her gown, and she tugged at his shirt, wanting skin, wanting closeness. "Are you certain?" he asked again, pulling back just enough to meet her eyes. "Once we do this, there is no going back to being strangers." "I do not want to go back," Aria said. "I want to go forward with you." That was all the permission he needed. Drevarius kissed her again, slower this time, savoring. His hands were skillful as he unlaced her gown, sliding it from her shoulders. She helped him remove his shirt, running her hands over the cool, perfect planes of his chest. He was beautiful in an otherworldly way, every line of him precise and powerful. They came together with a passion that felt inevitable, as if they had been moving toward this moment since the night he walked into his own mourning ceremony. Drevarius was careful with her, mindful of his strength, but there was nothing tentative about the way he claimed her. And Aria gave herself over to it, to him, to the impossible reality of being loved by a vampire king. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Aria's head on his chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. She could not hear a heartbeat beneath his skin, but she could feel the coolness of him, the otherness that made him what he was. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we stop pretending," Drevarius said. "Now this marriage becomes real if you want it to." Aria propped herself up to look at him. "You would truly marry me? Truly make me your queen?" "I already have," Drevarius said. "The court believes it, I believe it. The only question is whether you believe it." Aria thought about her life before the poverty, the fear, the constant struggle. She thought about her brother, healthy and thriving in the royal hospital. She thought about the past weeks, learning to navigate a world of immortals in power. And she thought about Drevarius, who had protected her and challenged her, and made her feel like she was worth something more than survival. "I believe it," she said. "I want this. I want you." Drevarius's smile was radiant. "Then you are mine, and I am yours. For as long as you live and after," Aria asked. "You said you could turn me, make me immortal." "I could," Drevarius said carefully. "But it is not a decision to make lightly. Immortality is a gift and a curse. You would have to give up the sun, give up your mortality, give up everything you have ever known. You would become something other than human." "But I would have time," Aria said. "Time to learn, to grow, to be with you. Time to truly be the queen you need." "You are already the queen I need," Drevarius said. "Mortal or immortal, that does not change." "But I will change," Aria said. "I will age and die, and you will be alone again, unless you turn me." Drevarius was quiet for a long time. "If I turn you, it must be your choice, completely your choice. Not because you feel obligated, not because you fear death, but because you want eternity." "I want eternity with you," Aria said. "But I also want to do this right. I want to learn what it means to be a vampire, to be a queen before I make that choice. Can you give me that time?" "I can give you all the time you need," Drevarius said. "I have waited centuries for someone like you. I can wait a few more years." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and Aria felt something settle in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never known. She was no longer a fraud or a pretender. She was Aria Thorne, wife of Drevarius, vampire king of Ashencross, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. The following months were a revelation. Aria threw herself into learning everything she could about the vampire world. She studied their history, their laws, their politics. She trained with tutors in diplomacy and etiquette. She learned to navigate the dangerous waters of court intrigue, using the same skills that had kept her alive in the mortal quarter: observation, adaptability, and the ability to read people. And she was good at it, better than anyone expected. Within 6 months, she had earned the grudging respect of several noble houses. Within a year, she had become a power in her own right, a queen who was consulted and feared and admired. Her brother Bryce recovered fully and came to live in the palace. He was wary of the vampires at first, but Drevarius won him over with patience and genuine interest in his studies. Bryce had a gift for numbers and strategy, and Drevarius gave him a position in the royal treasury. Watching her brother thrive, seeing him happy and healthy, filled Aria with a joy so profound it sometimes brought her to tears. But there were challenges too. A rival vampire lord from a neighboring territory made overtures of alliance that were thinly veiled threats. A faction within the court pushed for Aria to be set aside in favor of a vampire bride. And there were moments when Aria felt the weight of her mortality like a chain, when she saw Drevarius with his ageless courtiers, and realized she was the only one in the room who would grow old and die. One night, 2 years after their marriage had become real, Aria found herself back on the tower balcony where Drevarius had once made her a promise. The city glittered below, and the wind carried the scent of night-blooming flowers from the gardens. "You are troubled," Drevarius said, joining her at the railing. "I have been thinking about immortality," Aria said. "About what it would mean to become like you. And what have you concluded?" Drevarius asked. "That I am ready," Aria said. She turned to face him. "I have lived as your mortal wife for 2 years. I have learned what it means to rule, to navigate your world, to be your partner, and I have realized that I do not want this to end. I do not want to waste the years watching my body fail while you remain unchanged. I want forever with you." Drevarius cupped her face in his hands. Are you certain? Once it is done, it cannot be undone. I am certain, Aria said. I have never been more certain of anything. Then I will give you eternity, Drevarius said. But not tonight. Aria blinked. What? There is a ritual, Drevarius explained. A ceremony for turning a human into a vampire. It is old magic and it requires preparation. It requires witnesses and oaths and blood. I want to do this right, Aria. I want to give you a transformation that is worthy of a queen. How long? Aria asked. 1 month, Drevarius said. 1 month to prepare the ritual, to gather the court to make this official. Can you wait that long? Aria smiled. I have waited my whole life to find where I belong. I can wait 1 more month. The month that followed was a whirlwind of preparation. Drevarius explained the ritual in detail, how his blood would kill her mortal body, how she would die and be reborn as something new. It sounded terrifying and painful, and it was. But it was also a choice, her choice, made with full knowledge and complete willingness. The night of the ritual arrived. The grand hall was filled with vampires from across the kingdom, all gathered to witness the transformation of their mortal queen. Casimir presided over the ceremony, his ancient voice reciting oaths in the old language. Aria wore a white gown, symbolizing both her humanity and her death. Drevarius wore black, the color of eternity. Are you ready? He asked as they stood before the assembled court. I am ready, Aria said. Drevarius drew a knife across his palm and dark blood welled up. He held it to her lips and she drank. It tasted of copper and power and something wild and ancient. She felt it burn down her throat, felt it spread through her veins like fire. Then he bent and kissed her throat, and she felt his fangs pierce her skin. It should have hurt, but it did not. It felt like release, like letting go. He drank deeply and she felt her mortal life drain away. Her vision dimmed, her heart slowed. The world went dark, she died in his arms, and she was not afraid. When she woke, everything was different. The world was sharper, brighter, overwhelming in its intensity. She could hear every heartbeat in the room, could smell blood and fear and excitement. Her body felt different, stronger, faster, more alive than it had ever been. And she was hungry. Drevarius was there immediately, pressing a goblet into her hands. Drink, he commanded. She drank, and the blood tasted like life itself. It satisfied something deep and primal in her, and when she lowered the goblet, she felt powerful. How do you feel? Drevarius asked. Aria looked at her hands. They were paler now, luminous and perfect. She could feel the strength in her muscles, the sharpness of her senses. I feel like I could tear the world apart, she said. Drevarius laughed, the sound rich and joyful. That is how it begins. You will learn control, but for now, revel in it. You are immortal now, my love. You are eternal. Aria looked out at the assembled court, at the vampires who had once looked at her with disdain, and now looked at her with respect and awe. She was one of them now. She was a vampire, a queen, a force to be reckoned with. And she was home. The years that followed were extraordinary. Aria became everything Drevarius had believed she could be, a strong, clever, compassionate queen who ruled alongside him with wisdom and strength. She never forgot her mortal origins, and she used her understanding of the human world to build bridges between vampires and mortals, creating policies that protected both. Her brother eventually chose immortality as well, unable to bear the thought of leaving his sister behind. He became one of Drevarius's most trusted advisors, and the three of them formed a family that transcended blood and species. Aria learned to control her vampire nature, to navigate the hunger and the power. She learned to fight, to lead, to inspire, and she learned that immortality was not a curse when you had someone to share it with. One evening, decades after her transformation, Aria and Drevarius stood once again on the tower balcony. The city had grown, changed, evolved, but they remained constant, an anchor in the shifting tides of time. Do you regret it? Drevarius asked. Giving up your mortality? Aria leaned into him, feeling the cool strength of his body against hers. Never. I regret only that I wasted time being afraid before I met you. You were never a waste, Drevarius said. You were exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed you. A fraud who became a queen, a mortal who became immortal, a stranger who became my everything. Aria smiled. And you were a dead king who walked into his own mourning and changed my life forever. We have a gift for dramatics, Drevarius said. We have a gift for surviving, Aria corrected, for finding each other in the chaos and holding on. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the world turn below them. They had forever now, forever to rule, to love, to build something beautiful and lasting. They had faced death and betrayal and impossible odds, and they had emerged stronger for it. Aria Thorne had pretended to be a grieving widow for coin, and in doing so she had found a king, a love, and a destiny she had never dreamed possible. She had found eternity, and it was perfect. Years turned into decades and decades into centuries. The world changed around them, mortals rising and falling like tides, but Aria and Drevarius remained. They ruled Ashencross with wisdom and strength, becoming legends in both the vampire and human worlds. They faced challenges, rival kingdoms, internal strife, the endless dance of politics and power, but they faced them together, an unbreakable partnership forged in blood and love. On their 200th anniversary, they stood in the same grand hall where Aria had once pretended to mourn a king she had never met. It had been renovated countless times, but the essence remained the same, a place of power and ceremony, where history was made. "Do you remember the first night we met?" Drevarius asked, pulling her close. "I remember thinking I was going to die," Aria said with a laugh. "I remember being so terrified I could barely breathe, and now?" Drevarius asked. "Now I am exactly where I am meant to be," Aria said. She looked up at him, at the face she had loved for 200 years and would love for 2,000 more. "Now I am home." Drevarius kissed her, a kiss that held centuries of devotion and eternity of promise. Around them the court celebrated, music and laughter filling the ancient hall. But Aria and Drevarius were lost in each other, as they had been from the beginning, as they would be until the end of time. She had pretended to be his widow for coin. He had walked in very much alive. And together, they had built something more powerful than either of them could have imagined, a love that transcended mortality, a partnership that defied death, and a forever that stretched out before them, glittering with endless possibility. The vampire king and his eternal queen. The fraud who became real. The love story that began with lies and ended with truth. And they lived truly and completely, happily ever after.